Would the panel please come up? I thought that's what you told me. So, Emily, to think about just a simple question first. Early onset is before 60. We have always thought it was 65. Has this changed?
Recognizing that it can be very hard to pinpoint when a person's cognitive changes begin. There is some variation in how early onset is defined depending on which source you're reading. So some sources cite the definition of early onset to be before age 60, and some say it's before age 65. And many places will say onset before 60 to 65. So there's no real right or wrong answer. We do appreciate that it can be really hard to pinpoint. So these are just guidelines, really.
Thank you. Dr. Lee, please identify cognitive function exercises, and are there any specific exercises that have controlled clinical trials to demonstrate their usefulness?
With regards to cognitive tests or cognitive function exercises, I think one of the things that I would recommend is really thinking about it maybe in the way of, first of all, try to learn something new. And in learning something new, that could be reading the newspaper, it could be researching something, a question that you have, always engaging in positive activity like that. Another cognitive exercise that we endorse is practicing your memory. So whether it's starting off with maybe memorizing the provinces of Canada, or maybe the United States, the states in the U.S., but challenge yourself. Don't make it frustrating, but make it engaging. Something like a little game, something that's fun to do. Another thing is puzzles, and often people ask, well, what's a good puzzle? Is it crosswords? Is it Sudoku? Is it word jumble? And I think, again, the message is it depends what you like doing. Find it to be interesting. You're more likely to stick with it. I don't think there's any reason to suspect that there's one size that's going to fit all in terms of that. But if you engage in things that give you a variety of sort of challenges, I think that's helpful. The other thing you can do is try to look at your life as sort of like a detective game, the who, what, where, when, why. So if you're trying to remember things, you sort of ask yourself those questions. If you have an appointment, well, who are you going to meet? Why is that appointment happening? Where and when do we need to be there? And all of those things, and try and keep track of that. I think that constantly challenges your mind to be active. And the last thing is try to do something novel or unusual. You mentioned earlier, Dr. Beatty, about brushing your teeth, standing on one foot. Maybe do that. Or try brushing your teeth with the other hand than you usually use. I mean, just keep it interesting and engaging. The thing is that I would say that, in terms of research, there's a lot of clinical trials that have been done. We ourselves have been involved. Dr. Shung was one of the leads in looking at one of the computer-based games to look at cognitive improvements. I think part of the challenge is that we can't overreach with conclusions about that yet. I think that some companies have gotten into trouble recently with regards to making claims that weren't well substantiated in terms of preventing dementia. I think at best we can say that there are programs, there's computer-based, there's paper-based programs that are out there, but really finding something that engages you in an activity that you find interesting, I think is the most important. And of course, the research is ongoing in that way, so that message may change shortly. But right now, there's no one particular product that I think we can point to and say that everybody has to do.
Thank you. This is a question for Maria Howard. Well, first of all, there is an Alzheimer's Society of BC booth out there, and I think there's First Link information because someone was asking for the referral, how to contact First Link.
Yes, absolutely. There is a booth out in the lobby, and staff would be happy to talk to people about that specifically. But you can also go to our website, too.
Right. The question is, to what extent do legislation and policies around privacy create barriers to creating a dementia-friendly community?
It's an excellent question, and when we've been working with a variety of municipalities, we've certainly been talking about privacy, because privacy is always critical. I think, though, what is exciting is that there is a number of different changes that municipalities can make and put into policy that still respects privacy, but also makes changes. And one very simple one that has happened at the City of Vancouver is looking around parking spots and signage that are much clearly marked for people, not just around accessibility and mobility, but for other disability issues. It's also about teaching staff who are working in the municipalities that when people are phoning in to renew licenses, to renew different certifications, that would be maybe with a property owner, that the staff actually have been taught how to interact and engage with people who may seem to have some difficulty. The last thing, which is very exciting, is that we've recently made a video with the City of Vancouver for police, and it teaches police officers how to and engage and know how to interact with people with dementia and ensure it's a good experience rather than perhaps a judgmental experience. And we've just received some very exciting news recently that Stockholm in Sweden has reached out to us to actually take that video to their city. So it's a great opportunity to start to share. So I think in relation to privacy, it is always absolutely paramount that we respect that, but there are many other opportunities that we can make changes without causing that to be challenged. Thank you.
I'd like to, for Dr. Louis Ambrose, it's a two-part question. What about brain yoga? And what is brain yoga? And how can we find that kind of class? And the other thing is, are there any specific recommendations for someone working with someone who has dementia and the kind of exercises best maybe exercises to encourage the person with the dementia to do?
So maybe I'll answer the first one. Brain yoga, I know what yoga is. I'm not sure what brain yoga is, to be really honest. But if I can answer the question in the context of yoga, as most of us appreciate it. There is actually some emerging evidence to suggest that it would be beneficial because I think it has components of both physicality, but also the focus and mindfulness piece that really is coming up quite a bit as a strategy as well to protect your brain. So certainly Professor Art Kramer from Illinois, who really has published some key papers first demonstrating the benefit of exercise, specifically of aerobic exercise on brain health. He actually published a real nice study last year on yoga as well. The second piece about advice for a caregiver or a family member who with an individual with dementia, generally based on the evidence and also working with individuals is that what works for both of you. So papers have come out to suggest that even walking on a regular basis can be very beneficial, more from the perspective actually ensuring that you're trying to get them out and also getting some actual natural light. Sleep disturbances is common as individuals do develop dementia, and that is very disruptive and potentially can also affect some of the behavioral outcomes during the day. So there's a lot of suggestion that, with the exercise, and let's talk about it as being walking, is beneficial from all perspectives. So one is the physicality, but also potentially the exposure to natural light, which can be quite calming and also, again, beneficial for the circadian rhythm. But I think from that perspective, we don't know a lot, but as to the more exact prescription, that would be beneficial, but the evidence would suggest any type of activity, even light ones, such as going for a walk on a regular basis, could be quite beneficial. I don't know if that I can be more specific than that at this point.
Thank you. Just a follow-up to Julia's presentation and all of your interest in research, but where would you suggest that someone could start, Julia, given the information you collected this morning, if they wanted to participate in research at the clinic?
That's an excellent question. We have a website. I think, in all seriousness, we'll talk about websites a little bit in the second half, but in all seriousness, I think the first place to start is with your physician. So they will be equipped with all the information about ongoing trials that we have here that may be relevant for you or for the person that you care for. So the physician is sort of your best bet for the highest quality information with regards to what's going on with the clinic. Aside from that, I would say our actually, the best place to look for right now is in your little packet in front of you. There's a list of studies that's available for you to look at. I can also mention there's a couple of tables that might be of interest in the atrium. There's a research table that will tell us about some of the research that we're doing and which projects may be relevant for you. And there's also a fellows table, and they'll be thrilled to let you know about the projects that they're involved with as well.
Thank you very much. Nothing like a little PR. A question for Emily. Can the familial gene skip a generation and affect grandchildren?
Sorry.
Can the
Thank you.
familial
Repeat the question.
genes skip a generation and then affect grandchildren?
Okay, so can the genes that cause familial Alzheimer's skip a generation?
Right.
That's actually folklore number 5 that I wish I had time to talk about further in my talk, so I'm glad it came up in a question. I hear a lot of that concern about conditions skipping generations, and the genes that cause familial Alzheimer's disease are genes that work in a dominant effect. So what that means is that if you think general biology, we all have 2 copies of every gene in our body, one that we inherit from our mom and one that we inherit from our dad. And if you imagine these familial Alzheimer's genes, we all have 2 copies of these genes, and when there's no mutation in them, we're good. The problem arises if you have one mutation in just one copy of any of these genes, then you will develop familial Alzheimer's. But the matching copy is working perfectly fine. So when someone has one of these familial Alzheimer's genes, that 50-50 recurrence risk is coming from the fact that when someone with one of these genes has their own children, there's a chance that they pass on the gene, the familial Alzheimer's causing gene, but there's an equal chance that they pass on the gene that's working perfectly fine, 50-50 chance for each child. If a person with a familial Alzheimer's gene passes on their healthy working copy of that gene that doesn't have a mutation, the other parent is going to be passing on their matching copy of the gene, which is going to be fine given how rare these things are in the general population. So that child of that affected parent did not inherit the disease-causing gene, and if they didn't inherit it, there's no way that they could pass it on. So the short answer is no, it won't skip a generation.
Thank you very much. Phil Lee, I wonder if you could answer this question. A hearing aid company currently runs a print ad in mainstream media that indicates hearing loss is a cause of Alzheimer's. Is there evidence to support this? And if not, is there an organization that watchdogs misinformation and intervenes?
That's an excellent point. First of all, I haven't seen that particular ad. It's very interesting, and I think it does warrant some investigation and pursuit. I guess the first comment that I would say is that one of the important things that we do as part of what we provide for clinical care is to rule out other contributing factors that can also influence reasons why people may be having struggles. So in that case, there is a lot of truth to the fact that hearing loss, which can often happen, can be a difficult thing, and people don't remember what they don't hear. So I think that that's an important factor where we as clinicians and, just in general, we should always be thinking about those factors. And it's after ruling those things out that we often come to the conclusions of the diagnoses that we do. So in that respect, I could almost take what they say and say that hearing loss can be a source of potential confusion and maybe misinterpreted as a dementia and should be looked at. But specifically, I'm not aware of any particular link and or association between hearing loss being a direct cause for dementia, and specifically Alzheimer's disease. So in terms of that, I think that there is certainly a responsibility that we have as a society to make sure that accurate information is out there and that false claims aren't made in advertising. But specifically, I don't know personally about this, but maybe, Maria, you have maybe some input in this in terms of, is there a watchdog sort of program that looks out for this misinformation that's given to people who potentially would be very vulnerable to, suggested, benefits? I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm not familiar.
CBC Marketplace.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's nothing official, but there's certainly lots of advocacy groups and patients' advocacy groups that really do watch this and keep a quite local or local eye and international eye on it. Speaking out is important, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to mention that there's a few questions here about are these slides available and can we have access to the presentations afterward. And it's my understanding that there is a recording of the presentations and there is a website. And so perhaps, Howard, you can speak to that. Or Hakan.
We'll give you that information at the end, but we will have a recording on our website where you can review the whole day if you want.
And just a final question, because it's something that is commonly in the literature right now and on people's mind. And the question is related to, is there any research evidence on mindfulness regarding brain health aging and or progression of dementia? And I'm wondering if, Teresa, you have looked into that, or if, Phil, you've looked into that? Or maybe Julie looked it up online.
It's an emerging field. Certainly, our lab is actually doing some research on that within the context of a pilot RCT. In terms of the evidence, it's usually in a different population, so a lot has been done within the context or clinical populations, individuals with depression or anxiety, and seems to have very good outcomes. And so I think the thought is that, when you're anxious and stressed and constantly under stress, it's not good for your brain health. And I think so there's that sort of segue of interest as to what could it do for brain health within the context of cognitive impairment and dementia. I don't think the quality of evidence is quite there yet for us to make more firm conclusions, but certainly I think it's a growing interest and certainly potentially a synergistic complementary approach to some of the other components we've already touched upon today in terms of lifestyle. But I think the verdict is still out, but there is good evidence for other clinical populations, I think.
Well, thank you very much to our panel, and Dr. Feldman has the final word before you move to coffee.
Thank you, Dr. Beatty, and thanks to all our speakers and panel members for really what has been a very rich start to our day. Our hope for tomorrow is pinned on the next generation of scientific leadership and on the research that we do today. And we've been poking at this throughout the morning. The opportunity during the break is to visit our young scientists. They're at a table. Some of them are called fellows. Some of them are called students. Some of them will be standing by the poster boards. So while you take some nourishment, please take the opportunity to communicate with our young research scientists, and we will see you back in 11:10. And the opportunity for research participation is all over the atrium, so please avail the opportunity. Thank you.